the Winter Soldier and Black Widow. Bucky Barnes and Natasha Romanoff. Sometimes you get some good out of a bad situation, and that's exactly how Nat and Bucky started out relationship-wise. So around the time of the Cold War in the Soviet Union, Natasha trained Bucky Barnes in the Red Room alongside other students. Natasha, or rather in this storyline, Natalia, and Bucky both hit it off. I mean, they had a lot in common. The whole Russian brainwashing, the assassin skills. Natalia worked for the KGB and Bucky Barnes became the Winter Soldier for Hydra. So it's fair to say they had a lot in common. They were great for each other as well. I mean, they made each other feel like they were more than just assassins, which I love. They of course get caught and punished because of their love, but what does a Red Room punishment mean? I mean, well, it's a little bit different from the 50 Shades of Grey Red Room punishment. See, in this one, they brainwash you numerous times, put false memories right in your head, all that good stuff. So it's heartbreaking, man. They find love, the true meaning of life, and then they get brainwashed, sent away on secret missions, they bond again, fall in love again, and then so on and dan forth. Quite the history in comics and in the MCU as well. Natasha says a line towards Bucky after he escapes his holding cell in Civil War, and she says, "The least you could do is recognize me." So is this about her getting shot from the brainwashed Bucky back in Iran, or could there be even more history just sprinkled behind the Winter Soldier storyline that has yet to be discovered? And before we head over to number 9, guys, if you want to go ahead and toss us a thumbs up, that would be great. It goes a long way for us. It actually helps pay for all the things in the studio, so you can see all my facial flaws in HD. Number 9, Thor and Jane Foster. The God of Thunder from Down Under and Jane Foster. Nice. A relationship that is still being worked out in the MCU with Natalie Portman playing the God's love interest, sometimes in the movies. Now, the last we heard they broke up. Well, Jane dumped him. Or it was a mutual dumping, as Thor says. And this all began in the 60s when readers were introduced to Jane Foster. She attended med school and was soon hired by Dr. Donald Blake, who was actually the God of Thunder in disguise. Always safe to have a secret identity. I have like 3. I'll never tell. They're the king and queen of long distance. I mean, holy shit. One lives on Earth and the other lives on Asgard. They're totally devoted for each other, and at one point, Jane actually takes over and becomes the God of Thunder, while Thor was unworthy of wielding Mjolnir. And in recent comics, she's now Valkyrie. She's awesome. But her time as Thor was pretty exciting. The only catch was that her cancer would worsen every time she used the godly powers to save the day. So Jane ended up fighting until her last days, where she passed away in his arms. Now, Natalie Portman is returning in Thor Love and Thunder and will wield the hammer. That's confirmed. Let's just hope that she doesn't have to deal with any life-altering side effects like, I don't know, cancer? Number 8, Bruce Banner and Betty Ross. He's a scientist who turns into a green rage monster, and she's the daughter of an Air Force General, Thaddeus Ross. So Betty lost her mother at a young age, and her father didn't want her hanging around military bases, of course believing it's no place for a young girl. So she went off to boarding school. And when she came back, she was introduced to Dr. Bruce Banner, the scientist who was behind the Gamma Bomb project. Thaddeus wasn't already a fan of Bruce. He thought he was like a physical and emotional weakling, which is just a great thing to think of someone. And then when Betty and Bruce started falling in love, that feeling intensified. So after the whole Gamma incident, that changed Bruce into a part-time Hulk. They didn't have an easy go. The only way Thaddeus approved of their relationship was if he got a handle on becoming the Hulk, so he doesn't Hulk smash his daughter, right? I mean, that's fair, that's totally fair. He's looking out for his daughter, she doesn't have a mother, cool. So when Bruce was able to keep the brains while becoming a beast, Thaddeus figured the threatening aspect is no longer a worry. Cut to their wedding day. Right before they're about to be pronounced husband and wife, Bruce is attacked by the leader in the form of radiation. Not a great leader. And things got ugly, wedding ruined, just like that. So they went separate ways for a bit until Bruce returned to the Gamma base to successfully separate the Hulk and Bruce. Then Betty left her other boo, Ramon, and then the two got back together. Wow, talk about ups and downs in a relationship. Number 7, Captain America and Sharon Carter. This relationship is too good, weird, mostly weird, to not mention, okay? I mean, it came out of nowhere in the MCU, literally. Captain America was in love with Peggy Carter like his whole life, since he was a scrawny kid from Brooklyn. And then years later, when he's an established Avenger, she's much older now. And then right after she passes away, like right after, he got his sights on none other than another Carter. As Beyonce would say, hey Miss Carter. Even the actor who played Peggy, Haley Atwell, said at Comic-Con that she's not a fan of the new couple. She says, I just feel like I wouldn't want to date my great aunt's guy. It just feels like it crosses an this boundary. And Peggy just died. Yeah, that came out of nowhere in the MCU, but not exactly in the comics. See, Sharon, aka Agent 13, was the younger sister of Peggy in this case, but that was retconned because it was maybe a bit too weird. So when Cap first went on a mission to take Batroc the Leaper down, Sharon was by his side, and then the two, of course, hit it off while they were punching people in necks. She's actually one of the first people to learn of his super secret alter ego, and Cap's wild in the MCU. He's like, hey, I love Peggy. Oh, she's old and dying? Cool, no sweat, Sharon it is. Oh, I can go back in time? Peggy it is, again. Number 6, Spider-Man and Black Cat. Peter Parker and Felicia Hardy, aka Black Cat, is one of the more interesting relationships in Peter's life. Well, rather, Spider-Man's life. That's the fun part. See, she entered the Spider-Man comics back in 1979 with Amazing Spider-Man issue 194, and her father, Walter, was a famous cat burglar before, and he often inspired her to be the best at whatever she does, even if that includes committing crimes. She had a pretty rough origin story though. I mean, learning how to train and become an expert in combat was strictly to kill a man who had assaulted her at a party. And when it came down to finally getting this long-awaited payback, he was in a fatal car crash, thanks to alcohol. Don't drink and drive. So she has these skills now and nothing or nobody to tackle them with. So she took a page out of her father's book, donned a cool suit, and became Black Cat. Shortly after, she met Spider-Man, both in costume. And she fell for him. She could tell that he was a kind soul underneath the mask and trusted him. And that trust quickly evolved to lust and then, of course, to love. Eventually, Peter revealed his true self and she had a tough time accepting the fact that he was just an average kid. Their relationship is enjoyable and different because it's all about the super life in this case. It's not so much about Peter being there as a boyfriend, like, hey, when you're gonna be home? It's like, hey, when you're gonna meet me on top of this building, we're gonna go break some necks. The Spider-Man PS4 game nails that love triangle, so if you haven't played that yet, what are you waiting for? You must. Number 5, Kitty Pryde and Colossus. Age is just a number, right? I mean, you know, you can be 26 and you can date somebody who's 30. It's fine. It doesn't matter anymore after a certain age, right? You get older, it doesn't matter. So Kitty Pryde met Colossus when she just joined the school for gifted youngsters and quickly had a little crush on the Tin Man. The two shared kisses and tails and became pretty close over time. But he played hard to get at first, you know, kind of pushing her back. You know, I get it. Kitty wanted to go all the way, you know, home base, but he suggested that they wait until she's older. Great call. Amazing call. But fans were delighted to watch them grow together. Literally, they got older and they watched what started as a teen crush grow into this lovely adult relationship. Number 4, Jean Grey and Scott Summers. Scott Summers is the guy who gets around. So Cyclops and Jean Grey became close in the school for gifted youngsters after Scott was given a visor made of ruby quartz so he could control his powers, but he also looked pretty sick. So he shortly became deputy leader of the X-Men and then fell in love with his teammate, Jean Grey. And their love is strong. I mean, Jean committed genocide as the Dark Phoenix, and Scott was still on board, so nice. Their honeymoon was pretty wild too. Yeah, they were sent in the future in different bodies to raise Cyclops and Madeline Pryor's son, Nathan, who we all know now is Cable. I mean, it's either that or Sandals Resort, so. She's in his head too, like, literally. Jean created a psychic link between them both, giving them the ability to read each other's minds. I can't tell if I would love that or hate that. Number 3, Deadpool and Lady Death. Till death do us part. I mean, the idea of dying for somebody or dying for somebody's love isn't necessarily a new concept, but when it comes to the merc with the mouth, his love for death is ever more growing. I mean, the guy basically dies every other day. Or he comes really close to it at least. So when he was tortured at Weapon X, that's when it all began. And he's a pretty charming lad, so it didn't take much for Lady Death to eventually develop feelings for him every time she saw him. So she was a serious, powerful entity, and he would just show up and crack jokes, and then go back to life. She loved it, man. She loved his visits, she loved his humor, and then there's always the other guy. You know, this time in the form of, I don't know, Thanos? He was jealous that his near-death experiences were acting like these one-on-ones in The Bachelorette. So he cursed Wade with immortality so that he wouldn't see her. And at one point the curse was lifted, allowing for Wade and Lady Death to be together for a hot minute. For sure, one of the more interesting couples that have happened. Definitely. Have to include them on the list. Number 2, Spider-Man and MJ. She made her first appearance in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 42, but fans knew about her long before that. See, the redhead who digs the webhead was played most famously by Kirsten Dunst, and the couple seems to go through quite a bit together. I mean, early on in their dating days, they broke up numerous times, but eventually they found their way back together. Yeah, at one point, MJ was dating Harry Osborn and Pete was seeing Gwen Stacy, but after her tragic neck thing where he, you know, killed her by accident, they kind of got back together. Even when he asked her to leave, she stayed. That is true love. So the two tied the knot in the Amazing Spider-Man Annual 21, finally. I mean, he proposed to her years before, but she made a run for it. Can you blame her? One of the biggest comic book moments for the couple was in the storyline One More Day, where they have to strike a deal with the devil Mephisto in order to save Aunt May's life. The deal? Well, they were never married, ever. It just didn't happen. Kind of like Shrek 4, but a lot better than the movie Shrek 4. A lot better. And last but not least, number 1, Vision and Wanda Maximoff. Perhaps one of the most interesting couples. He's an android, she's a witch, and they go through a lot together. So Vision and Wanda tied the knot back in 1974, and they welcomed twins. Well, kind of. The catch was these twins of Wanda and Vision came out of nowhere, and it was revealed later that their souls, the kids' souls, were part of Mephisto. God, he always gets in there and messes things up, eh? But then another pair of twins were created, and then they grew up to become Wiccan and Speed, bearing magic and super speed as their powers. Now in the MCU, their romance is super fun to watch. They both got their abilities from the same Infinity Stone, so although Vision is dead, there's clearly some sort of connection still, which we'll see play out in WandaVision like really soon. Wanda is super powerful. She can change the entire world simply by wishing for no more mutants. She breaks reality as we all know it. I mean, I can't wait to see more of this side to their relationship. Really see what Wanda can do, you know? Because they've been holding back on her.
Number 10, Blackbolt and Medusa. Blackbolt and Medusa were an arranged marriage, but they also managed to find love in their relationship too. Now Blackbolt has many wives, but for him, really only Medusa is the one that he loves. And he loves her pretty intensely. Medusa is not just his wife either or his love, but she's also a fitting royal to serve by his side. She just honestly is a really good ruler as well. And all these things together is just what makes them so great. When they are together, that is. As there have been times when they've been apart. But in the end, they pretty much always find one another. When they are not busy being dead, that is. Which is kind of what's happening lately. But before we dive in, a word from this video's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. Did you ever think it would be possible to find a game that was fast-paced with amazing graphics and a compelling story, but that also fit in your pocket? I didn't until I played Raid Shadow Legends. This game not only has over 500 different champions for you to discover, but also boasts of various different artifacts and skill trees for you to customize your roster with. With so many different champions for you to mix and match as you create your own epic team, this game provides an endless amount of strategies for you to try out. Use our link in the video description below to download Raid yourself to your mobile phone or PC while I tell you more. I love the look of this game. These graphics honestly just blow my mind. And this month, Raid has got their biggest ever update. The main event is already here, the Doom Tower. It's a giant tower with 120 floors, a bunch of secret challenge rooms, and 12 seriously badass bosses for you to take on. There has never been a better time to start playing, and to help get everyone started in the tower, the Raid team are giving away a super special champion, Bulwark. He's absolutely awesome in Clan Boss, and he's also going to be a huge help in the tower against those bosses. On top of that, they are also introducing 14 new champions just in time for the holidays and hosting a bunch of holiday events and tournaments. Click the link in the video description for your free Void Champion, an XP booster, 50 gems, some energy refills, and an ancient shard, all as soon as you get in game. You'll find your extra rewards in your inbox for the next 30 days only. So click that link in the description to join in on this epic fun. We'll see you there. Alright, now let's get counting. Number 9, Spider-Man and Ghost Spider. I'm just going by their current aliases, but really, we don't see these two truly hit their stride until we see them all grown up in their alternate future. Though whether we're talking young crushes, strong cross-reality friendship, or the alternate future where they end up settling down and having a superpowered family of their own, I just really like these two together. They seem to bring out a lot of good in one another while also creating a safe space for the other to not just be themselves, but feel completely at home while doing so. They both understand what it's like to be the spider person, the hero of their alternate universe, because they both have been that. They both know that pressure and that rush. They might not be ready to tie the knot or continue their romantic relationship just yet in current continuity, but I think we all hope that eventually these two will get there, because they're just pretty cute together. Number 8. Proxima Midnight and Corvus Glaive. If the MCU was your introduction to Thanos' Black Order, then you might not know that these two are together. In fact, they're married. There were little hints sprinkled throughout, but there was nothing explicitly said in the MCU. However, in the comics, yes, these two are married. You might be surprised that I'm even including villains on this list, but hey, this is just a list for Marvel power couples. We didn't say anything about what their alignment had to be. Proxima and Corvus to me are so great together because they are both pretty supportive of one another's goals and their allegiance to Thanos when it's convenient, but through it all, they actually still stand by one another. Unless of course Thanos, or anyone else for that matter, kills Corvus, then Proxima kinda does whatever she thinks is best for herself, which has even meant continuing to serve Thanos after he killed her husband. Yeah, not a great look. In the MCU, we saw this relationship manifested in little moments, like right before the snap that vanquishes Thanos and his army, you can see, if you watch closely, Proxima with Corvus Glaive corpses in her lap in the background, mourning his death, which happened in combat, before she's just snapped out of existence. You gotta look for it, but it's there. Number 7. Captain Marvel and War Machine. One of my favorite relationships in the comics is the adorable one between Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, and War Machine, James Rhodes, aka Rhodey. These two both have a seriousness to them and a strict sense of responsibility, both having a background with the military. Both are even pilots. Their relationship might not be as long lasting as some of the others on this list, but it just weirdly seemed to fit really well, even though at a glance they might each not be the partner you'd think of for the other. Rhodey's apparent death was so intense for Carol that it was even the catalyst for Civil War II between Iron Man and Captain Marvel. I mean, they basically just needed a reason for Carol to do everything that she did in that story arc, cause it was all pretty wild, and she was definitely more in the wrong in that story, I'd say, in comparison to Tony Stark. But the crazy thing is, it was a good catalyst because her and Rhodey were actually a pretty great couple. Although when it comes to these two, it's likely they'll always have at least some distance between them, as Carol is always a big fan of space. Number 6. Angela and Sarah. You might know Angela from the beautiful series 1602 Witch Hunter Angela, but she actually has surfaced in multiple series besides, and there also are multiple versions of her character. For the purpose of this list though, we're talking about the version of Angela from Witch Hunter and from the series Angela Asgard's Assassin and Angela Queen of Hell as well, where we also learned that Angela was Loki and Thor's long lost sister. But what we're really here to talk about is not her history, but her relationship with Sarah. Their relationship is likely the first main character trans romance that we've seen, as Sarah was assigned the male gender at birth but was actually born a woman. Sarah helped Angela, and in exchange Angela helped Sarah escape a strict religious order who would not let her be. Sarah then was able to live as a woman after that with Angela, and the two fell in love. There is nothing these two wouldn't do for each other. Angela even journeyed to hell for Sarah, literally looking for any way to save her love. Aww. Number 5. Hulkling and Wiccan. Not even a massive intergalactic war could tear these two apart. Hulkling and Wiccan are both members of the Young Avengers who dated and were engaged for quite a while in the comics before finally tying the knot. Previous to, but revealed in Marvel's massive crossover event, Empire. These two are the actual cutest together, and no matter what, find a way to stand by one another. Through some of the hardest times, including when Billy was dealing with some intense depression following the disbanding of the Young Avengers team. Billy Kaplan, aka Wiccan, was struggling with his place in life, and not only was Teddy there, leaving the door open and giving space for Billy to talk to him about it, but at one point Hulkling even sees how much Billy is struggling and gives him that loving push to actually just reach out for that support system and face his depression, bringing them even closer together when Billy realizes that Teddy has committed to never leave him, no matter what. Till death do us part, he says, and this remains true throughout their relationship. Number 4. Gambit and Rogue. I mean, Gambit and Rogue are just one of the hottest couples out there, so you know I had to include them for that alone. But aside from them both being a couple of hotties, they are also one of the sweetest couples out there who have been to hell and back and still managed to make it work. Their relationship has been very tumultuous, but after all the trauma, they finally managed to get married. Now they are both in Dawn of X and were even considering starting a family together before Rogue ended up in a classic comatose-like state near the beginning of the newest Excalibur series. Classic Rogue, just saying, just classic. I love these two together because they embody truly that feeling of desire. They both want to be together so much, but for most of their relationship have been unable to be as close as they desire. And it's what makes their relationship both so sexy and so interesting to read about. Aside from that, they are both two super powerful X-Men, with Gambit's powers often being underrated in comparison to the rest of the team, in my opinion. I also just love how random their marriage was when they like basically hijacked Colossus and Kitty's supposed to be wedding that didn't end up happening. They were like, we're not getting married, and they were like, well, we're gonna get married, boom. And everyone was like, what? Okay, cool. So Gambit and Rogue. Number 3, Mr. Fantastic and Invisible Woman. I mean, yeah, I kind of have to include these two on the list, considering they are part of Marvel's first family. I will admit, there are a lot of times I actually have actively not shipped Reed and Sue together, but lately in the comics, I've been getting some really nice moments between them, and I cannot deny that I love that these two have that intense commitment to one another and to their family. No matter what the world throws at them or what challenges they face in their personal relationship, Sue and Reed just seem committed to staying together no matter what, even when it would maybe be best if, I don't know, if they didn't. But through everything, they have made it work because at the end of the day, even when they're frustrated or feeling just grossly underappreciated, they would continue to choose one another, even with some of those prominent flaws. And that is honestly what makes them so strong together. Also, they are probably one of the most brainy couples in the world, and Sue's powers are pretty crazy when it comes to just everything she's capable of. While they are both the brains as well, I honestly just love to think of how Sue's abilities make her kind of more of the brawn to Reed's brain. It's cute. Number 2, Storm and Black Panther. These two have a love that is currently so tragic, but still so true. I don't think these two will ever stop loving one another, no matter their allegiance or what happens between them. Most recently, we saw these two revisit their feelings for one another in issue 13 of Marauders, when Storm was forced to steal the Skybreaker blade from Wakanda, her destined blade for her as competing champion in the Otherworld tournament during the Ten of Swords event. The truth is that Aurora and T'Challa first fell in love when they were young and found their way back to one another. Aurora was T'Challa's queen for a time, and the two were driven apart during Avengers vs. X-Men. In the end, Storm felt her place was with mutant kind, while T'Challa felt that both of them owed their allegiance to Wakanda first. It's this conflict lately that has often divided them, but has never kept them from truly loving one another. Number 1, Luke Cage and Jessica Jones. So I had to put this couple at the top spot, even though they rank a little lower when it comes to their superpower levels, and they aren't a king, nor a queen, or even a goddess. But hey, Luke and for a time Jessica were known as Power Man and Power Woman. Does it get more power couple than that? They are also just too adorable together for me to not consider them so highly on this list. To me, they also represent a very real couple while still being super. Just two people who started with mutual respect for one another as heroes, and then had this physical attraction that they both realized meant more to them when Jessica approached Luke to reveal to him that she was pregnant. The best part is that before Jessica was even able to reveal that to Luke, he confessed that he had feelings for her, making their next step together after the reveal even more perfect. And they both agreed to start a family together. Luke proposed to Jessica, but it wasn't until a week after their baby was born that Jessica actually agreed. They are both not just super strong and tough as individuals, but both make each other stronger too, which is why I really love these two together. Just relationship goals.
And at number 10, Harley Quinn and Nightwing. Let's begin our list with a pairing that is the literal definition of a hookup: Harley Quinn and Nightwing. This unlikely pairing tickled each other's fancies in the Batman and Harley Quinn animated movie. Nightwing tails Harley from her undercover job, and she manages to knock him out. Next thing he knows, he's tied up to a bed and things get steamy, with Harley seducing him, Nightwing getting real hot under the collar, and Harley teasing him about thinking that he wasn't into girls. Little dig at his golden age history with Batman. She also takes a dig at him for his 90s hairstyles. Then the lights turn off, Harley gets on top of him, and then we cut to later, in which Batman interrupts the aftermath. Needless to say, it is definitely a scene you want to check out. In at number 9, Jean Grey and Pyro. Sort of. In a fantasy reality, we think. So Pyro hasn't really been in the Marvel Universe for some time now, but with the Dawn of X relaunch, Pyro has made a comeback in Marauders, in which he has a fantasy of sorts. Now in this fantasy, people are praising him fawning over him, he's the best thing ever, and Jean Grey hits on him while she lies on the hood of a really sexy car. Sure, he is obviously imagining this, and as of this recording, the issue that this sequence is in actually hasn't come out yet. It comes out on March 4th. So if you're watching this and you've read the issue, let us know in those comments below if the Fantasy Pyro and Jean Grey actually get it on. And at number 8, Ramon Watts and America Chavez. During the Fresh Start relaunch, the most recent iteration of the West Coast Avengers had America Chavez and Ramon Watts on the team, alongside Kate Bishop, Johnny Fuse Watts, Gwenpool, and Kid Omega. Now the team tried to get financed by starring in a reality show that followed their exploits, so we got some pretty intimate on-camera interview moments with them. Ramon, aka Alloy, started dating America before her powers became apparent, and when the couple were captured and put in harm's way, Ramon's mutant ability came to light. She's been permanently merged to vibranium, coating her body in an impenetrable vibranium suit that she can manipulate and control, similar to how the Venom symbiote can extend and form weapons. Anyway, these two were a totally adorable couple in a series that had some really wonderful, hilarious moments, and we miss it. Get to see them on dates, being real cute and stuff, and yeah, it's a good time. Next, number 7, Mystique and Destiny. I feel like I'm really leaning into the gay on this list. It's a good thing. While Mystique and Destiny's relationship is nothing new, recent news out of X-Men issue 6 gave us confirmation on something that fans have long suspected. Spoilers for this number, by the way, since that issue is pretty brand spanking new as of the time of this recording. While the relationship between Mystique and Irene Adler has long been brushed over, the issue confirms that the two were in fact married. In the current X-Men story arc, Xavier and Magneto continue to hold Irene's resurrection over Mystique's head, using her one true love as a way to bribe her allegiance to them. And in the issue, Mystique, pissed off at them, rightfully so, flat out shouts, "I want my wife back." Now, it's the first time we've ever heard their marriage be acknowledged. At the time of their relationship's inception, Chris Claremont had to fight against Marvel editors and the still somewhat prevalent Comics Code Authority about having an LGBTQ romance depicted. We hadn't even seen the two kiss until 2019's History of the Marvel Universe issue 2. Irene died in Uncanny X-Men issue 255, knowing what was going to happen but wanted to save Raven, meaning at some point these two were married off-panel at some point prior to that. Moving on to number 6, Peter Parker and MJ in the MCU. Next up we have a couple from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, one that comic book fans have long been familiar with, except the MCU version is quite different than the Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson that we know from the comics. Now, in the recent Spider-Man Far From Home film, the second in Spidey's series from Disney and Marvel Studios, one of the many outcomes of the movie's conclusion includes Peter and MJ, which stands for Michelle Jones in this universe, admitting their mutual feelings for one another. It's adorable. And the big post-credit sequence involves them going on a really cute date where Peter swings with her through the New York City skyline. All before his identity is then cruelly revealed by J. Jonah Jameson, that is. Regardless, we're excited to finally have a couple in the MCU that we actually want to root for. Sorry, you all know that Bruce and Natasha were never gonna work, it was way too forced. And at number 5, Joker and Punchline. Okay, sure, our title is the newest superhero hookups, but let's make an exception for a very popular supervillain, one who has been single for quite a little while now while his ex has been making leaps and bounds. We're talking about the Joker and his new beau Punchline. Punchline is very different than Harley Quinn. She's cold, calculated, quite silent, and also a total sadist. The Joker considers her the funniest person that he's ever met in his life. Now, the character made a cameo in Batman issue 89, but made her full appearance in Year of the Villain, Hell Arisen issue 3. While she's barely been in the DC universe, her popularity amongst fans has skyrocketed, with sales, that is. Speaking of the Joker though, let's talk about what his ex has been up to with our next number. And at 4, Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy. While the Joker is busy declaring war with Punchline at his side, Harley Quinn has been actively working towards turning a new leaf. And also a greener leaf, because you know, Poison Ivy, green in nature. Ivy and Harley were only relatively recently confirmed to be an actual couple after years of speculation, which root back all the way to their appearances on Batman the Animated Series together. They've flirted a whole lot. They've kissed quite a few times, and even found themselves as a pair in other alternate universes in the DC multiverse. But on DC's Twitter in 2015, it was confirmed that they were actually a couple. Between then and now, we've seen them romantically entangled, we've seen them break up, and we've seen everything in between, becoming one of the most liked couples in the DC universe in recent years. Unfortunately, it seems like DC is kind of squashing the couple once more. Heads up for spoilers for Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy issue 6 up ahead. Without giving too much away, Ivy says goodbye to Harley with a kiss on the forehead, which many fans felt was a major letdown and devalued the relationship, because she's essentially gonna go off and maybe die, so, But here's hoping that they always just kind of find a way back together. I wasn't kidding when I said heavy on the gay. Moving on to number 3, Black Widow and Winter Soldier. Like Mystique and Irene Adler, this is a couple that has been a thing for a long time. But back at the end of last year, we got to see this old flame reunite. Natasha Romanoff and Bucky Barnes, Black Widow and Winter Soldier. Now the two first sparked a relationship after Bucky was placed in cryo sleep, found by the Soviets after his presumed death during World War II. He would train Natasha as a young assassin in the 1950s in the Red Room, and when the two started a romantic relationship, it was discovered and Bucky was put back in cryo sleep and her training intensified. Now he's shown up in Web of Black Widow issue 2 after Nat has been reborn as a clone of herself with all of her memories after being killed during Secret Empire. And while the two don't hook up during their encounter, we do get a pretty sexy flashback of their more intimate moments from the past. Both of them in underwear. In at number 2, Nico Minoru and Karolina Dean. After 13 years of shippers wanting this pair to happen, runaway characters Karolina and Nico are finally a thing. It's been a long time in the making, with Karolina having harbored feelings for Nico after being rejected. We actually get a flashback scene of it in Runaways issue 12, which came out in 2018. And it is like significantly less harsh than what actually happened in the initial encounter that this, rejection occurred. The issue itself has Nico accompanying Karolina to a ball for her parents' charity that she's forced to attend, now that she's 18 and a member of the board. Karolina tells her how much having her there has made it easier for her to make it through the night, and then Nico admits that she was confused in the past and that she didn't know herself as she does now, asking Karolina to give her another chance. And she does. The two kiss and our hearts melt. Much of the new 2017 Runaways series has been aimed at fixing mistakes of the narrative's past, one of which many felt was Nico and Karolina not getting together. And finally, in at number 1, it's the X-Men throuple, people, Scott, Jean, and Wolverine. One of the questions many fans had after the first X-Men issue after Dawn of X was what was up with Logan, Jean, and Scott's bedrooms that all shared doors and were connected. They also seemed pretty chummy. So of course there arose speculations of the three of them being more of a throuple than Wolverine and Cyclops constantly duking out over Jean's affections. Spoilers for the recent X-Men issue 7, by the way. While things were hinted to some sort of open relationship defying the monogamy that we've seen from these three in the past, this recent issue depicts Wolverine and Scott sharing a moment in the middle of the night that contains some pretty intimate details. Scott comments about how Logan's body hair makes it too hot for him to sleep, teasing him. Scott invites Logan to an outing with Jean and the kids that they're training, with Logan saying, "Jeannie in a bikini," to which Scott replies, "Scott in a Speedo." Wolverine's response? Well, who could say no to that? While we've yet to see the throuple action actually play out, there's a lot of subtext going on, and a lot of fans hope it becomes a reality.
Number 10, Spider-Man and Mary Jane. I know there's probably going to be a lot of outrage because I put these two in the number 10 spot on my list, but I'm also trying to keep this list to mostly super to super couples. So, the fact that Spider-Man and Mary Jane even made my cut at all just goes to show you how much I really love and respect the ongoing relationship that these two have had in the comics. Spider-Man and Mary Jane are no longer married, but it has been hinted in the comics recently that we could see a return to these two potentially renewing their vows and getting married once more, undoing the undoing of their original marriage, which happened during the events of One More Day, where Peter gave up their marriage in a deal with Mephisto to save Aunt May. In the Secret Wars miniseries Renew Your Vows, Marvel was actually able to see just how much fans love these two together when that series ended up having massively high sales, proving that we love seeing Peter and Mary Jane together, not just as a couple, but as a family unit too. So maybe we'll see something like that. I'm into it. Number 9, Aquaman and Mera. Aquaman and Mera have been married before, but they also recently got married again. After the New 52 reboot, however, at DC, Aquaman and Mera's first marriage was apparently wiped out of existence. Now finally, after a long tumultuous romance and engagement filled with tons of comic book obstacles, they are finally together once more. Even more impressive, Aquaman managed to surprise Mera with the wedding, and she liked that. She was like, yay, surprise wedding. I feel like most people would not enjoy having a wedding sprung on them with all their family and friends, but I guess for Mera and Arthur, they were just like, hey, it's been a long time coming at this point, let's just do it, and Mera was ready to go with the flow. It was super cute, I will say. Number 8, Gambit and Rogue. I love that these two basically hijacked someone else's wedding in order to tie the knot. Gambit and Rogue gave us a surprise wedding when Kitty Pryde and Colossus, who were actually set to get married at that time, ended up deciding not to go through with their wedding. Seizing the opportunity, Gambit and Rogue decided to step in and chose not to waste the moment, getting married in their fellow mutant stead and cementing their love for one another. A love that honestly has teased us for what feels like centuries. So I'm so happy they're finally married. It's so cute. Number 7, Batman and Catwoman. Batman and Catwoman have been married on alternate Earths and even in alternate timelines, but they also at one point walked down the aisle in today's main continuity as well, or at least almost. While the wedding didn't end up happening and Selena even betrayed Batman on the same day she was meant to marry him, they also ended up having a moment together following the events of Flashpoint, where it finally seemed like they were going to pull the trigger and get married in a much less lavish setting, simply planning on going to see a judge to get their marriage validated. Instead, their love for one another left them lost in the moment and one another for an entire evening. The next morning, they both realized, hey, they never ended up actually going to see the judge, but instead both agreed that they actually didn't really need anyone to sign off on their marriage, nor did they ever need a lavish wedding. For Batman and Catwoman at that point, they looked at it like, we already operate outside the law, so why should our love for one another and our marriage to one another need to be validated by the law? Not going to lie, I kind of love that technically Catwoman and Batman never need to actually get married in order for them to consider being married to one another, and in order for them considering their partnership to be valid. So they don't really have like a marriage certificate, but they're still pretty much married. Number 6, Hulkling and Wiccan. These two might be newlyweds, but their marriage also marked a huge milestone for Marvel, being the first gay marriage between two superheroes at that publisher. I can't believe it actually took us this long, actually. Very surprising. It took a long time for Hulkling and Wiccan to progress in their relationship, but slowly and surely, over time, their relationship grew and evolved to the point that now I honestly can't imagine a world where they are not together. They just belong with one another. Both share an understanding of one another that helps to elevate not just themselves, but their partner. They are strong apart, but honestly, they're even stronger together. And even a massive intergalactic war could not separate these two. Number 5, Midnighter and Apollo. These two had a pretty strange and kind of divisive wedding issue when they did get married, but they were also the couple that paved the way for others like Hulkling and Wiccan, and even Northstar and his husband Kyle Jinadu, both married couples from Marvel. Midnighter and Apollo are from Wildstorm, Jim Lee's indie publisher, which would later become a DC imprint, meaning that now Midnighter and Apollo are technically DC heroes, or anti-heroes. Midnighter and Apollo ended up getting married in the early 2000s, and I believe were the first same-sex superhero marriage, not just within DC, but ever in comics. Since New 52, their initial marriage has been undone, but they are still often known for being a couple. So unfair that their marriage has been undone. Number 4, Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman. The marriage between Reed Richards and Sue Storm is one of the oldest, long-lasting marriages left to us today. Despite all the problems these two have faced together and had to confront about the other, they remain together and are often presented as being a strong couple. Sue and Reed's status as the first family of Marvel means that we'll likely never see these two split because of, well, just what they represent at that publisher. A sense of reliability and togetherness which radiates out into so many other Marvel titles today. Sue and Reed are both members of the Fantastic Four and have 2 super children together. Franklin Richards, who has of late short-circuiting but usually immensely powerful reality warping powers, and Valeria Richards, named by her godfather Dr. Doom after his first love, who is potentially on the road to become, if not already, an even more brilliant mind than both her genius parents combined. Number 3, Superman and Lois Lane. One of the most iconic marriages out there is definitely the married couple that is Lois and Superman. or Lois and Clark. This wedding was a long time coming, especially for Lois, I imagine, who initially in her own series, Lois Lane, Superman's girlfriend, spent a long time dropping hints for Superman to not just date her, but to marry her as well. Though, I mean, such was the time. That's what people did back then. Lois and Superman finally got married in the 90s, for the second time actually. They've been married twice in the main continuity, in fact. While the New 52 seemingly undid their marriage by rebooting the characters, we were then fortunate enough to also have our favorite couple survive. Phew. So their marriage wasn't undone. So in the New 52, there actually ended up being two versions of Lois and Superman, one of which was the couple that was first married in 1996. Yay! Or for them first married. Like I said, Silver Age, Golden Age, it's a lot of things. Not even a DC reboot can stop these two from being together. While Lois isn't herself a superhero in the conventional sense, she is definitely a hero in the everyday sense, working as a hard-hitting journalist, and honestly, that's a profession often underappreciated today. Journalists are basically heroes. Everyday heroes. Real-world heroes. Number 2, Black Panther and Storm. You know your relationship is big news when the Watcher calls a ceasefire in the midst of a civil war. For Black Panther and Storm, their union was also about more than just their love for one another, although that was definitely a big part of it. These two coming together represented a powerful union for the nation of Wakanda, who in Storm had gained a fierce goddess for a queen, and their union also represented the coming together of two different worlds, the Avengers and the X-Men, who very often didn't quite see eye to eye, despite both being heroic groups. But for T'Challa and Ororo, this union was also very personal, with the pair of them falling for each other at a young age, only to have their various commitments to their own teams often keep them apart. But finally, they had committed to be together. Although their marriage did not last and ended in divorce, their love for one another still burns bright, and so many fans hope that we'll one day get to see these two come together again. Number 1, Mr. Miracle and Big Barda. They may not have been married quite as long as Sue and Reed, but Mr. Miracle and Big Barda have still been together since their marriage in 1974, which is still an impressively long time, I think, especially in comics. Also, oddly enough, both couples were drawn by Jack Kirby. Maybe being drawn by Kirby is the secret to a happy marriage? Or it could be that old adage that reveals their true secret to longevity: giant wife, happy life. Scott Free and Big Barda definitely seem to have a pretty happy life together overall. They both complement one another so well when it comes to their personalities and their skill sets. It's no wonder that they are still happily married today in 2021. And I have an honorary marriage superhero couple for you as well. They didn't make my cut because they never got to tie the knot, but in my opinion, that's just because these two were robbed of their happy ending together. The honorary almost married superhero couple for today is none other than Batwoman, Kate Kane, and her fiance, Maggie Sawyer. Maggie was Kate's longtime girlfriend, and while not a superhero per se, she was a police captain, so in a way was often fighting against a lot of Gotham's criminals in her own heroic capacity. Unfortunately, DC didn't let the creatives behind Batwoman see the engagement through to the end, giving the reasoning of heroes shouldn't have happy personal lives as their excuse.
Number 10, Spider-Man and Black Cat. Peter Parker and Felicia Hardy. They're one of the more interesting relationships in Peter's life. Well, rather Spider-Man's life, that is. See, she entered the Spider-Man comics back in 1979 with Amazing Spider-Man issue 194. And her father, Walter, was a famous cat burglar before her, and he often inspired her to be the best at whatever she does. Is that bowling? Is it paint by numbers? No, it's being a burglar. She had a pretty rough origin story as well. I mean, she learned how to train and become an expert in combat just to take out a guy who had assaulted her at a party. So when it comes down to finally getting payback, he was in a fatal car crash thanks to alcohol. Don't drink and drive. So she had these skills now and nothing or nobody to tackle them with. So she took a page out of her father's book, she donned a cool suit, and became Black Cat. Shortly after, she met Spider-Man, both in costume, very important, and she fell for him. She could tell that he was this kind soul, and she trusted him. And of course, the superpowers and backflips surely helped. Now that trust quickly evolved to lust and then to love. Eventually, Spider-Man revealed himself, his true self, as Peter Parker, and she had a pretty tough time accepting the fact that he was just this average kid. So their relationship is enjoyable and different because it's all about the super life. It's not so much about Peter being there as a boyfriend or what he is as a person at home. She just wanted to work with a partner on the streets. And tights, they wouldn't hurt as well. Everyone loves tights. The Spider-Man PS4 game nails that love triangle. If you haven't played that already, you have to check it out. And before we head over to number 9, if you guys could go ahead and give us a thumbs up on this video, those likes really do wonders for this channel. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Now back to more super lovers. Number 9, Green Lantern and Star Sapphire. One of the most powerful couples in the DC universe, Hal Jordan and Carol Ferris. They're one of those couples that's off and on again, but I mean the ones worth fighting for usually end up being the ones that are worth it, or something nice like that. So Carol owned the Ferris Aircraft Company and then had found herself attracted to the fearless pilot, but she couldn't follow through because, you know, for sure not allowed, especially in those rankings. And she also loved the hero, the Green Lantern, without connecting the dots. Double the love, triple the excitement. Now Carol was selected to become queen of the Zamorans, but she didn't want to leave Earth because, you know, Hal Jordan. So the Zamorans brainwashed her and she became a villain named Star Sapphire, and she fought the Green Lantern. She lost, they left, they took her memory, she got her powers back, but not her memory. So she thought Superman was responsible for killing Green Lantern, although he's still alive. Then her memory returned and she kept the gem that gave her powers, and her love mixed with his willpower makes for a pretty epic super couple. They're one of my favorites. Number 8, Thor and Jane, the God of Thunder from Down Under and Jane Foster. It's a relationship that's still being worked out in the MCU currently, with Natalie Portman returning to play Jane Foster. Now, the last we heard, they broke up. Well, I mean, Jane dumped him, or it was a mutual dumping of sorts. But this relationship began back in the 60s when readers were introduced to Jane. She attended med school and was soon hired by Dr. Donald Blake, who is actually, of course, Thor in disguise. They're the king and queen of long distance. Holy crap. One lives on Earth, the other is Asgard, and they're totally devoted for each other. And at one point, Jane actually takes over and becomes the God of Thunder, while Thor was unworthy of wielding Mjolnir. Now, her time as Thor was pretty exciting, of course, but the only catch was that she had cancer, and that cancer would worsen every time she used the godly powers to save the day. Jane ended up fighting until her very last days when she sadly passed away in Thor's arms. Now, Natalie Portman is returning for Thor 4, Love and Thunder, and she'll wield the hammer. Let's just hope she doesn't have to deal with any of those life-altering side effects. Number 7, Catwoman and Batman. When it comes to dating, Bruce Wayne doesn't really need too much luck. He's got the charm, he's got the looks. I mean, the money, sure, that's a plus, we like that. Selena Kyle made her first comic book debut in Batman 1 back in the early 40s, simply known as just the Cat. Now, the pair were actually married at one point, believe it or not, on Earth 2, and they had a child named Helena Wayne, who grew up, of course, to become the Huntress. Now, in the 50s, the Comics Code Authority made the duo go through it. See, they were putting these restrictions on everything, and Batman being with a criminal just sent the wrong message to kids. So now Bruce also has this on and off thing going on with Talia al Ghul, and almost every depiction of these two characters, they end up having the hots for each other. So Talia is cool, and she's there sometimes, but most of the time, it's Catwoman. So they both end up together at the end of the Nolan Batman trilogy. It's a plot point in the Batman the Animated Series and in Batman Returns. Now we're just looking forward to seeing this romance come back to life yet again with Robert Pattinson and Zoe Kravitz in Matt Reeves' Batman. Number 6, Aquaman and Mera. Mera made her first comic book debut in Aquaman issue 11. She was once the queen of Dimension Aqua until a criminal named Liron took over control and got rid of Queen Mera. So Mera went to the Earth dimension, and then that's when she met Aquaman and his sidekick, Aqualad. They offered to help her, and Liron soon captured both of them and brought them back to Dimension Alpha. Aquaman comes, saves the day thanks to the help of Gwisp, and then he defeats Liron. Mera returns to Atlantis with Aquaman. The two fall in love, get married, and then they made their new home at the Atlantean Royal Palace. How lovely. Some have argued that Mera is in fact more powerful than Aquaman, being pure Atlantean and trained in the mystic arts. Do you guys agree? Let us know in the comments. Number 5, Jean Grey and Scott Summers. Cyclops and Jean Grey become pretty close in the School for Gifted Youngsters. After Scott was given a visor made of ruby quartz, he could now control his power, and he looked pretty cool. Stupid. He shortly became a deputy leader of the X-Men and then fell in love with his teammate, Jean Grey. Sounds like a normal young love evolving under the roof of gifted youngsters. Their honeymoon, however, that's when the super stuff comes in and takes it up a notch. See, their honeymoon, they were sent into the future in different bodies to raise Cyclops and Madeline Pryor's son, Nathan, who we now know as Cable. I mean, that or Sandals Resort, you know, make your pick. They keep it interesting, at least, you know? She's in his head too. I mean, literally, Jean has now created a psychic link between them both, giving them the ability to read each other's minds. Now, I can't tell if I'd love that or hate that. I mean, of course, they went strong until Jean sacrificed herself to save everybody from the Dark Phoenix Force, and Scott would surely take his time moving on. Number 4, Superman and Wonder Woman. Clark and Lois may be a great couple, but when you think of the New 52 run with Superman and Wonder Woman, I mean, if we're looking at super couples, we've got to go with Superman's other girl, Wonder Woman. They were literally known as the power couple, and that part of Superman's life has basically been written out or forgotten, and fans thought that it was rather forced. Now, in the Justice League issue 12, we find a front cover illustration that is quite memorable. Sometimes key intimate moments are hard to conceal when you have the powers of gods. So after The Dark Knight Returns, Frank Miller decided to dive into a scene we didn't know we needed to see with both of them. So her and Superman get it on, and they do it in the sky, of course, because, I mean, you know, where else do you go? A hotel? No, it's far too boring. The sky is literally the limit. So this caused massive tidal waves. I mean, volcanoes were blasting off. They even shifted the earth a bit. People were evacuating islands. Guys, this is crazy. This is like a terrible day. This is a terrible day for everybody, but those two get it on. Next time you guys want to get it on for 5 pages, maybe, I don't know, go to space, Mars, Antarctica. That'd be kind of, still humans, still bad. Just go to space. Go do it in space. Number 3, Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman. The Fantastic Four is coming to the MCU. Finally, here we go. And one of the biggest rumors is that John Krasinski and his real wife, Emily Blunt, will be playing Sue Storm and Reed Richards. I hope this happens, or Pam from The Office. We'll take her as well. She's great. So Sue and Reed first met back when they were children at a boarding house. They grew up together and went to become part of an epic superhero team, which is great. Sue with the powers of invisibility and force fields, and Reed is now super stretchy. They're a brilliant couple. Like education-wise, they're literally brilliant. Reed's a genius, and in the early days, he wasn't too nice to Sue, but the writing fortunately changed, or at least he'd gotten better. Sue often has to get Reed out of trouble, but he's got the brains. He likes to make all their gear, and on top of that, they also have some pretty super kids at one point. Franklin and Valeria Richards, whose powers are even more impressive than that of their parents. Number 2, Vision and Scarlet Witch. Guys, spoilers coming in hot for WandaVision. If you're not caught up, skip this one. Perhaps one of the more interesting couples. He's an android and she's a witch. And they go through quite a lot together. Especially now in the MCU, we're gearing up for the finale of WandaVision, and the love between these two is really making things complicated for S.W.O.R.D. See, Vision and Wanda tied the knot back in 1974, and they've even welcomed twins. The catch was, these twins of Wanda and Vision came out of nowhere, and it was revealed that their souls were actually part of Mephisto's, which is currently a running theory with Agatha Harkness being this antagonist in WandaVision. I don't think they're gonna bring in Mephisto. I think they're gonna do more of a nightmare type thing, keep it more kid-friendly. But these twins have also grown up in the comics to be known as Wiccan and Speed, bearing magic and super speed as their parents alike. So in the MCU, Wanda and Vision's romance is super fun to watch. They both got their abilities from the same Infinity Stone, so although Vision's dead, I think, who knows, there's clearly some sort of connection left still. My guess is that she has part of his soul inside of her from the Infinity War sacrifice. Wanda is super powerful. She once in the comics changed the entire world simply by wishing for no more mutants. And she can break reality as we all know it. And I can't wait to see what happens in the show because it's wild. She is fully now the Scarlet Witch. And let me tell you, a lot of goosebumps. I may or may not have stood up at that after credit part. Kicking off the list at number 10, Black Widow and Bruce Banner. Okay, remember in Age of Ultron when Black Widow was the key to calming Banner down? They were in love, right? I mean, they were flirting at the beginning of the movie, and then even Steve Rogers was like, hey, you're not breaking any bylaws, haha, no sweat, brother. Like, it's a thing, it's happening. And then they're at Clint's secret little family farmhouse talking about running away together. And then after all of this, when Bruce returns to Earth, he says hi to Nat, and then she's like, hi Bruce, that's kind of it. Weird. Well, according to Infinity War co-screenwriter Stephen McFeely, he said they certainly tried to make this happen. We have scenes, we wrote them, we shot them, of the two of them hashing it out. You've been gone, I've moved on, that kind of stuff. It became very clear that it was a scene that was not really essential to the plot. It couldn't survive Infinity War. That thing has to be on rails just to get to the finish line. Couldn't wrap up loose threads just because you wanted to. I mean, that's fair, that's a good call. But I feel like Endgame, we could have spiced it up a little bit, no? I mean, Black Widow dies and Bruce like throws a bench, maybe like 90 yards. It's not even that big of a throw. I'd throw a fit. I'd throw a fit if Scarlett Johansson was my girlfriend and she died. I'd throw a big fit. And before we go on to number 9, guys, if you could go ahead and give us a like down below. The thumbs up right there, because it really helps us out here at our studio. You guys rock. Number 9, Hulk and Company. Okay, for this one, we go to Ultimate Wolverine vs. Hulk. So Wolverine at this point is a little occupied, okay? He's on the way to take out the Jolly Green Giant. So he heads to a Tibian town, he's tracking him, he's using his sense, and then finally, he gets his sights on him, and let's just say it's a sight you wouldn't forget. Yeah, he walks in on Hulk with not 1, not 2, but like 40 women. Hi Bruce, he says before popping out his claws. It's crazy Wolverine tracked him down by sniffing. I feel like he got to that door and was like, yeah, I'm gonna come back later. That's something's wrong there. Something's not nice in there. Number 8, She-Hulk and Star Fox. Of course, I have to throw this one in the mix. So Eros, aka Star Fox, has this really messed up ability where he can make anybody he comes in contact with fall in love. Like Cupid, but with more yuck. Yeah, he even has the face of somebody who does weird shit like that. He looks like every Brad I've ever met. So the two of them hook up, and Jen even talked about how it was a great time. Okay. Cut to She-Hulk issue 6. Jen is defending Star Fox in a assault case, and the question is, will this affect his Avengers status? Like, yes, most definitely. That's usually how this works. So Jen got to thinking, although she made the first move, did he make it happen? Well, it all ended up being consensual, and Arrow's love touch powers were deactivated. Probably for the better, because, well, I'll get into that a little bit later on. Number 7, She-Hulk and Juggernaut. Shifting over now to Uncanny X-Men 435, The Trial of Juggernaut. It's standard professional practice to not hook up with your clients. I mean, I think, especially if that client is a big bad. So Jennifer Walters at this point was representing Juggernaut. And then, in a moment of heroic actions, Juggernaut kind of proves he's not all bad. He doesn't like save a cat out of a tree or anything remarkable, he just decides not to kill a guard. So Jen Walters is like, huh, interesting. Is this a scam? I wonder. Why didn't you escape? He's like, I don't know, man. My dad was a rocket scientist. I've always been a failure. Women's rights are the best. I'm a huge Jets fan. That's literally how it goes. And then Jen's like, oh, and it gets her attention because in the next page, the room is a goddamn mess. The bed has broken into the ground. The lamp is busted. And guys, worst of all, the windows are wide open. They didn't even try and close the curtains a foot. There's like nothing. It's just all glass. Freaks. You're freaks. Number 6. Hulk and She-Hulk. I'll be honest, I was gonna save this one for number 1 on the list, but I didn't want this video to end and then have you guys sitting there like, gross. So in the Old Man Logan storyline, it gets a little ew. We have this gang, the Hulk gang. Yeah, sounds pretty sick, right? They go around bashing people in who don't pay rent. Hell, if that was a Disney Plus show that was announced, I'd be so pumped. Oh wait, Hulk gang is the result of She-Hulk and the Hulk having kids together? I feel like I've said enough already, so now allow me to show you enough. Yep, yuck that. No way. Number 5, Hercules and She-Hulk. She's had a crush on Hercules for a while. I mean, I feel like most of us did growing up, no? He looks similar to Star Fox, so clearly she's got a type. In She-Hulk issue 30, it opens with this shot. She's expressing how if she's gonna fall off the wagon, it could be worse than having it be with Hercules. I mean, fair. But how does something like this actually come to fruition? Well, she mentioned falling off the wagon, but the only wagon that's falling is Hercules' wagon right into the palm of her hand. That's right, a move she picked up from the X-Men. She straight up grabs Hercules by his bum bum and then just hucks him at their giant-sized enemy, which is a great power move, something we almost saw last year in Endgame, actually. Yeah, Ant-Man was gonna throw the Hulk, who's gonna throw Spider-Man, and then he would have probably died. That's a lot of power. So this plus taking down an enemy together, things are heating up. There's a lot of chemistry, a lot of chemistry. After all, once you use somebody's assets like that, the rest kind of makes sense. I mean, maybe not in an RV in a parking lot, but hey, I'm not judging. Number 4, She-Hulk and Tony Stark. I mean, it was only a matter of time before these two crossed paths and did the dirty. So they're both known for their crazy hookups. And then in She-Hulk issue 17, we see it go down. But it's different, okay? So Tony at this time is the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Jen Walters at this point was an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. So it all starts with a debriefing. Of course, a debriefing. Now, was the debriefing professional in any manner? Do we have PowerPoints and laser pointers? No, we didn't. No. Tony gets a candlelit dinner aboard the helicarrier. Even Clay Quarterman's like, hey, maybe I should debrief her. I don't know, just a thought. Get out of here, perv. The issue is interesting because like I said, they're both known to be the soups who get around town, but Tony gets treated like this cool playboy dude. They're like, yeah, keep doing it, man. Keep getting those girls. And then She-Hulk gets all the shame. The double standards here are nuts. So while they're about to open this conversation up, Tony starts to say, well, Jen, try looking at it from this angle. Bam, evil attacks in the form of robots. And they're not even out of bed yet. Great timing. She-Hulk's like, yeah, don't take this the wrong way, but you should definitely get dressed right now. It would have been a good conversation too. She-Hulk would have told them exactly what's up and the readers would have been like, okay, heard. Fair. Number 3, Kyra and the Hulk. Planet Hulk is a great run. We have this savage alien planet, barbarian tribes. It's kind of like Gladiator vibes, it's great. And when it comes to love, it's still in the air, just this time around it's a bit more of a duty rather than a passion. So we find Kyra old strong and the two hit it off. like really quickly. Hulk comes out and asks her to be his queen. Just like that, let's do it. Sure, Game of Thrones style, alright. Our guy doesn't waste any time. We'd love to see it. Then their wedding, shadow ceremony happens, and out comes 2 kids. After her death, yeah, she gave birth to Scar and his evil other half like in secret, Hero Kala. I wish we saw this unfold on Sakaar in the MCU. I feel like Ragnarok should have been a touch darker. Alright, it was too fun. It was too fun. Sue me. I don't know. Number 2, She-Hulk and Man-Wolf. The son of J. Jonah Jameson, John Jameson, a lot of J's in there, got married to She-Hulk. Yeah, it was during the Civil War where the two had been dating and then decided to take it up a notch in the terms of holy matrimony. She loved him so much she would purposely try and stay in her human form because Man-Wolf preferred that. Gotta love controlling relationships. Sounds lovely, but this is a weird romance list, so there's more to it than just that. See, Man-Wolf and She-Hulk had a rocky relationship, so when they got married, it was kind of weird. You're like, do they love each other? This is kind of, he's really controlling and he's weird. Well, it turns out their love wasn't so natural after all. Star Fox, that weirdo that I mentioned earlier in this list, he was using his powers, his love powers, to make them love each other. So it was never really authentic. It's all a sham. So when she finds out, not only is she hurt and heartbroken, but she quickly slides over those divorce papers, and Man-Wolf and her go separate ways. But it wasn't easy for Man-Wolf. I mean, Jen Walters is a catch. I'd be pretty upset too. I'd be like crying and signing, tears would be dripping onto the paper. Oops, gotta get another one. And finally, number 1, Hawkeye and She-Hulk. Okay, with all these new Disney shows being announced, there's like 50 of them, I swear. One of them that I'm most excited for is the animated What If series. There's a lot of fun and a lot of weird in these comics. Like Volume 2, Issue 114, for example, we see Jen Walters and Hawkeye have a kid. Yeah, they name him CJ, little Clint Jr. He shares both skills of his parents, that of being green and lean, while also knowing how to shoot an arrow. It's a great combo. You're gonna get a lot of shit done. You're gonna kill it at birthday parties. This all happens when the Beyonders assemble heroes and villains to scrap it out during the events of Secret Wars on Battleworld. But what if they never left after they settled a truce? Although we don't see the two in their awkward flirting, what's your favorite color? Stages, they seem to hit it off really quite well. I love the what if stuff. I mean, Captain America and Rogue, I mean, that alone is just, there's a lot of crazy in there.
Number 10, Captain Marvel. I can't deny, I actually kind of like this ship, but it still feels pretty out of left field, especially if you're more of a cinematic Marvel fan, and that's where a lot of your knowledge comes from. And even if you're not, while there has been quite a bit of flirting between the two in the comics, I would have never expected either hero to actually act on those flirtations and possible feelings. Anyways, Carol basically had a bit of a crush on Spidey, which has come up multiple times in the past, and both were close friends due to their time working side by side on the Avengers. While Carol herself tends to be a bit more serious and Peter is a bit more silly, the two have some pretty adorable interactions, and they also have a lot of strong mutual respect, which is what it's all about when it comes to romance, baby. They went on a date back when Carol was still operating under her Miss Marvel mantle, but her crush has also come up a few times since then. Spider-Man bartered to get that initial date with her in exchange for basically his superhero help. The date was awkward, but it ended on a not so bad note when both heroes kind of realized they were just working way too hard to impress the other person instead of just being themselves, which is also what romance should be all about, just being yourselves. Also, I like that I did this when I was talking about people having mutual respect. Like, this is fighting. I don't know why I did this, but you know, mutual respect. So we did see them go on that one date, however, we have not seen them date since, even though it went pretty well by the end of it. Number 9, Deadpool. Okay, so this one isn't an official romance, more of a bromance, but it's shipped enough by people that we could consider it a fan-based pseudo-romance, which, yeah, is a thing I just made up now, so that's a thing now. Fan-based pseudo-romances. That's a term. Basically, Deadpool is borderline in love and obsessed with Spider-Man. It's pretty one-sided for the most part, but the two do have their moments, and there are times when Deadpool even inspires Spider-Man, or at least makes Peter consider Deadpool's maybe not as terrible and as annoying as he originally thought. The two have helped each other out multiple times and even have a whole team-up series together, and it lasted 3 years. It's pretty romantic. Number 8, Mary Jane Watson. For this Spider-Man, we're not talking about Peter Parker, obviously. I'm not trying to argue that their relationship is weird because, you know, it's been going on for a long time. Although at times, that relationship between Peter Parker and MJ definitely can be weird, I would argue. I'm actually talking about here the relationship between the Scarlet Spider and Mary Jane Watson, Ben Reilly, who for a time was also known as Spider-Man. While we don't actually see how their romance plays out in the alternate world belonging to Universe X, it is implied that the two had a daughter together there who grows up to become Spider-Girl. It's never explained how this came about, but the idea of Mary Jane ending up and settling down with Ben Reilly makes me wonder what happened to Peter in this alternate universe. Or is it possible that initially Mary Jane thought this was Peter, with Ben being himself a clone of Parker? I have so many questions. Number 7. Ultimate Katie Bishop. This weird romance belongs to the Spider-Man known as Miles Morales. What's the deal with this relationship? Well, in the Ultimate Universe of 1610, Kate Bishop is not like the one we have in Earth 616. She isn't Hawkeye's apprentice, nor does she become Hawkeye in this reality. Instead, we learn she is dating Miles Morales and is just a normal student. Or so it seems. In reality, her parents are Hydra agents who sedate Miles when he visits and then kidnap him and experiment on him, alongside Dr. Doom. Ultimate Doctor Doom. Fortunately, he does manage to escape and of course decides to break up with Katie before leaving. Gotta love those extreme ultimate romances. So weird. I also like that Miles was like, yeah, so you guys like kidnapped me and experimented on me, so I think I'm just gonna like break up? I think I'm just gonna break up with you, but this was weird. Thanks. It's like a weird way to end your relationship. Number 6. Jackpot. With Jackpot, it's all pretty confusing because we have Sarah Earhart, the real superpowered Jackpot, and Alana Jobson, who is posing as Jackpot and uses drugs to give herself powers so she can become a hero. Here we are mostly talking about Alana Jobson. Alana Jobson, who is posing as Jackpot. While Alana herself is implied as being attracted to Sarah, when posing as Jackpot and fighting alongside Spider-Man, he initially thinks that she might be his ex-girlfriend Mary Jane. The two of them have a few flirty moments while fighting together. Jackpot even calls him Tiger, considering the name of her character is obviously meant to be a play on Mary Jane's famous catchphrase, "You just hit the jackpot, Tiger." This is also what compels Spider-Man to want to learn more about the new superhero. In reality, Alana Jobson is paying Sarah to use her superhero identity and registration papers, because she just really wants to be a hero. She ends up dying as a result of this desire when the superpower-inducing drugs and hormones she uses together end up killing her when mixed with a blindness serum, despite Spider-Man successfully giving her the antidote to said serum. This romance never really goes anywhere, it just ends in tragedy. Number 6. Emma Frost. This one is pretty strange, but it's also coming at us from an alternate reality, so you know, you kinda just gotta go with it. I think what really shocked me about it though is that Kitty Pryde and Peter Parker were also known to date in the Ultimate Universe, and so I've always kind of thought of Kitty as being, you know, quite younger than Emma, and that was the thing that made me go like, wait, what? So how old? What's happening? So I was just confused in general by that logic, although this is comics, so while in some realities characters may have a greater age gap, in others they may actually be the exact same age, closing that gap completely. And in this comic, that is what is happening. In Marvel Adventures Spider-Man, which takes place in the alternate reality of Earth 20051, both Emma Frost and her BFF Shat Sandoval had a crush on Spidey, and Emma Frost is the same age as him here, so it's not weird. It's a little weird, but it's not weird. Emma, being a telepath, used her powers to uncover his secret identity, and she causes a bit of trouble when Chad and Peter start dating. Eventually, her trickery, however, is exposed, and she's forced to face the consequences of her actions. Here, Emma Frost is known by the codename Silencer, and ends up becoming an ally to both Chad and Spider-Man later on. Number 4. Black Widow. The strange thing is, while this happened in Marvel Team Up issue number 82 as a quick little thing, when Black Widow loses her memory temporarily, it also has been a comic ship in an alternate world where there is an amalgam alternate version of Black Widow who is basically a blend of both Black Widow and Black Cat, which yes, is one of the coolest alternates for both Black Cat and Black Widow. I know, it's pretty great. The issue where these two, however, initially hook up comes to us from way back before that. How it ends up happening is Spider-Man saves the day for Black Widow, who at the time believes she is a school teacher named Nancy Rushman. The other weird thing is that Natasha has also lost her memories of who she is, but has managed to retain her fighting know-how, and also assists Spider-Man with apprehending criminals, not thinking that it is weird at all for her to be doing. But, you know, I guess the fighting know-how maybe is in her physical memory? I don't know how that all works, but brains, stuff, wiring. Physical memory? Spider-Man recognizes her and recognizes that her being enamored with him is admittedly pretty weird, as is the fact that she thinks she's a woman named Nancy Rushman when she's not. Once her memories are back, Black Widow is over the flirtation and basically just dips at the end of the issue. She's like, this was cool, but also not into you. Bye. Only me as Nancy Rushman was into you, Spider-Man, sorry about that. Number 3. Spider-Woman. While this isn't an official thing that has happened as of yet, we have gotten quite a few flirty moments between Spider-Man and Jessica Drew from Brian Michael Bendis' run on the Avengers. They weren't full-on shipped, but there was definitely some suggestive light shipping happening there. At one point when they are teamed up, Jessica even scans Spider-Man to make sure he's not a Skrull, just because she finds him to be so strange. His response was to ask if they were on a date. I guess he's just used to women calling him weird on dates, which kind of makes sense because Peter Parker is pretty awkward and weird. Fair enough. Number 2. Silk. One of the strangest romances that Peter has ever had is with another one of the Spider folks, Silk, Cindy Moon. Apparently they were both bit by the same radioactive spider, which is why they believe they are so irresistibly infatuated with one another. Either that or they just are inexplicably attracted to each other. The whole fact that they don't seem to have control of their physical urge to be together makes this relationship one of the weirdest that Peter has ever had, and kind of one of the most uncomfortable in my opinion, especially as even when they're in danger they just feel the urge to just get physical instead of, you know, dealing with the problem at hand. Like, their attraction to one another not only seems to be completely uncontrollable, but it can also potentially endanger innocent lives, or their own lives even. Number 1. Marrow. Yep, probably one of the weirdest relationships that's happened out there for Peter Parker. There was a random time that he briefly dated Marrow. Why? Well, I don't know, cause comics. These two dated very briefly and even had a team-up one-shot titled Spider-Man Marrow in the early 2000s, which delved into their brief relationship and Marrow's change in personality. Their relationship ended after Marrow realized she wasn't really herself, as she was being brainwashed and used by S.H.I.E.L.D. to hunt down life model decoys. After she regained her memories, she escaped S.H.I.E.L.D., but the two ultimately broke up because yeah, I mean, she hadn't quite been herself basically throughout their relationship, so that'll do it. Oh, also she was a student at ESU where Peter was guest lecturing as a grad student, and Sarah refers to him multiple times in this issue as Mr. Parker, which I cannot deny I found quite a bit creepy. If you're calling your partner Mr. something, I don't know about that. Seems weird. Maybe that's just me. Number 10. Candice Nelson. That time when Daredevil very briefly dated Foggy Nelson's sister. Oh yeah, Foggy has a sister. Apparently this happened so quickly it's basically the smallest blip on Daredevil's love line, I'm sure, when it comes to Palm ratings. Candice is Foggy Nelson's younger sister who is studying journalism at ESU and ended up doing some snooping and attempted to expose the government and university for some involvement in some super shady activity. She and Foggy have always been at odds because she sees him as the way too stiff establishment type, and he sees her as the rebel who thinks that she's above the law. In the end, she and Daredevil had a bit of a thing at a time when Daredevil was pretty much wanted by every woman who appeared in his comic, including Natasha Romanoff, Black Widow. Oh, and after years of being friends with Foggy, Matt didn't even know that he had a sister till we got past the 100th issue of Daredevil, which is pretty weird. It's also implied later on that she is way too young for Matt. Also, her face is something else in that whole issue where that comes up. She's like, I missed you. And I'm like, what's going on? You look crazy, Candice. Number 9. Elektra. While Elektra may be one of Daredevil's greatest loves, it doesn't mean she can't be one of the strangest as well. It all boils down to the fact that Elektra is a really intense anti-hero when she's not busy being a villain. She's an assassin who has zero qualms with killing anyone in her way, which makes those two a kind of strange match. However, their costumes match really well, which is likely meant to symbolize some of the similarities that these two have. They are both intensely skilled fighters with a lot of darkness in their past and their present, to be honest. her present. Well, yeah, because Elektra did come back to life, so it did happen. She has a present, even though she did. However, Elektra kind of paved the way for all the death and destruction, it seems, that dating Daredevil seems to bring to most of his partners. So there's also that. Number 8. Becky Blake. This is a pretty weird one, mostly just because it seems like Becky Blake and Matt's relationship is a very one-sided and has always remained that way, and yet Becky never gives up. But also because Becky is another character who has just suffered a lot of trauma and tragedy, some of which was caused by Matt Murdock himself and some of which was not. While many people might know Karen Page as the sole secretary for Nelson and Murdock, after there was Karen, there was Becky. Becky herself lost the use of her legs after suffering an attack by Michael Reese, who Murdock would later bring to justice. Becky would consistently express her feelings for Matt, who seemed conflicted before deciding he wasn't interested. Maybe it was his relationship with Karen, which was also a huge mess, that ultimately affected his decision. Either way, Karen remained a friend to Matt for a long time despite all the crazy stuff he put her through. In fact, she even also became a lawyer and joined their firm for a while. Eventually, however, she chose to firmly distance herself from both Matt and Foggy after having a near-death experience and felt that Matt Murdock was no longer worthy of her trust. And she was like desperate for him for so long, and I'm just like, wow, that one thing though, she's like, and that's it. I was super into you, but I can't anymore. Number 7. Moondragon. Yeah, this was a weird one. A brief one, but a weird one. Daredevil and Moondragon had a brief infatuation with one another in Daredevil issue 108. After he leaves Natasha, Black Widow, who also has the hots for him, she mourns the loss of Matt, knowing that he has eyes for Moondragon. What? Okay, so even if we ignore the fact that Moondragon is usually presented later as being a gay character in the comics, this is still a really weird ship. The two are described as being inexplicably drawn to one another, but ultimately decide to go their separate ways because they are galaxies apart. Well, literally. I also love that Moondragon originally explains that they can't be together because of their respective orientations toward life in the cosmos. Apparently. They also, I believe, one time like psychically mind melded, which is pretty sexy for Moondragon, I think. She's like, let me get into that beautiful, brilliant mind. Number 6. Dakota North. I mean, this one made sense in terms of how it kind of came about, and it wasn't a full-on romance specifically, but these two did hook up. It all went down after Matt had suffered a pretty big loss and was still technically married. After the hookup, the not so great part was that pictures of these two doing the deed were circulated, because Kingpin is obsessed in every way possible you can imagine with Daredevil. They ended up on the front page of all the newspapers, which was super awkward for both Dakota and Matt, and also for a time cost Dakota North pretty unfairly, if I might add, her reputation. Matt came out mostly unscathed though in comparison, although there was definitely a cost for him as well when it came to these pictures. The images made everything super weird between the two going forward. And kind of awkward for I think a lot of people in that comic. There were a lot of people that were like, what's happening? Number 5. Karen Page. Karen Page has to have one of the most tragic stories out of all of Daredevil's love interests. One of anyways, because as I said earlier, there's a lot of tragedy here. Karen and Matt had an on and off again romance that eventually resulted in Karen's death at the hands of Bullseye. Surprise, surprise. Karen betrayed Matt by selling out his secret identity due to a drug addiction. However, she did return to warn him afterward. In the end, Matt and Karen came back together despite the revelation that she had been the one to sell out his secret identity in this case and had betrayed him. She got clean and the two of them got back together. They would later break up again and get back together a few more times, with Karen even forgiving Daredevil for faking his death and helping him when he had a crisis where split personalities appeared to emerge, which kind of makes sense given his dating history, but we'll get to that later. They had the most rocky romance likely in comic book history overall, and Karen actually gave her life to save Daredevil. But also she went through some crazy stuff, I feel like, because of Daredevil. Poor Karen Page. R.I.P. Number 4. Mila Donovan. There are fates worse than death, and that seems to be what Mila Donovan got when it comes to her relationship with Daredevil. She was driven insane by Mr. Fear, who had been targeting her for months and posing as her therapist after she ended up marrying Matt Murdock. She was driven insane, killed someone as a result, and ended up being locked away for her own good when private care also wasn't working for her. In the end, her husband Matt was denied visitation rights while Mila was in treatment, as it was believed that he was actually the cause of all of her problems. Yikes. Her parents attempted to get custody of Mila again after they learned of everything that had happened to their daughter and blamed Matt, which is kind of fair, to be honest. In the end, Matt agreed to their request after pictures of him sleeping with Dakota North surfaced. Overall, he was just going through a lot and he needed a shoulder to cry on, which ended up turning into a weird relationship with Dakota, which we talked about earlier. Matt had been attempting to lobby to get Mila freed from the mental institution, but in the end, he acknowledged that he just needed to let her go. Bullseye did attempt to kill her when she was made one of his targets, but fortunately, Daredevil had already predicted this play and had Black Widow on standby to protect Mila. All in all, this relationship became all kinds of messed up, and I'm still amazed that Mila is alive today. And before we move on to our number 3 spot, just a quick little reminder to give this video a thumbs up if you can, if you will. It really does help us out here at the channel, and thank you for doing so. Number 3, Heather Glenn. Heather Glenn is another weird partner for Daredevil in that her story was also deeply tragic. I guess this is becoming no longer weird since everybody's story is deeply tragic. She was a beneficiary of his, a wealthy socialite that he ended up dating. In his Daredevil guise, he ended up saving her father from Purple Man, Kilgrave, who had been controlling him. However, her father was so distraught when he found out all that the Purple Man had made him do that he still took his own life while he was in prison. In the end, his daughter would follow suit. She blamed Daredevil for her father's death and attempted to betray his secret identity multiple times to get back at him. Still, somehow, Matt got past that and Heather got past her own hatred of DD, and the two ended up engaged. In the end, however, Heather took her own life, hanging herself after she became distraught when criminals destroyed her business, which, of course, she also blamed Daredevil for, and which he once again may have deserved that blame. Maybe. Number 2, Black Cat. This is a pretty random one. Black Cat isn't someone you'd associate with Daredevil, mostly because she is usually so obsessed with Spider-Man that everyone she has ever been with outside of Peter Parker tends to have to do with some kind of play of getting back at him or something to do with Peter himself. For Black Cat, it's usually all about Spider-Man. So, how did this come about? Well, it all went down when Spider-Man recruited Daredevil to help him free Black Cat from prison. But while they were developing a legal strategy, Black Cat herself escaped and the two of them had to track her down. It was during this time that Daredevil developed an attraction to Black Cat and she to him. Although for Black Cat, there still really only seems to be one true superhero for her, as both she and Daredevil admitted that their relationship was more of a fun physical thing than anything serious. Although I guess I'm not super surprised that they're attracted to each other because they're both like hotties, but I'm also just like, this is like a random thing that someone was like, what if they got together? Everyone's like, I guess why not? Number 1, Typhoid Mary. Typhoid Mary has got to be one of the strangest pairings for Matt, especially considering he was the one that caused all the grief in her life after he knocked her out of a window. True story. This trauma brought forth from Mary 3 split personalities, at least 3, which are later kind of explained as being part of past trauma, but were kind of just triggered into resurfacing by Matt's accidental influence. By his accidental violence, really. Still, you can pretty much blame Matt for creating the villain that became Typhoid Mary. One of these personalities was that villain, another was hypersexual, and the third was much more modest in comparison to the other two. I guess the most normal of all 3 personalities, really. These are the most commonly acknowledged personalities, but she also appears to have other lesser utilized personalities when it comes to the comics, such as Mutant Zero. Daredevil for a time was involved with all 3 of her main personalities, but it gets weirder. A frequent ally of the Kingpin, Mary has also attempted to kill Matt multiple times. Oh, and while she is a mutant, she only seems to be able to access her mutant abilities through certain personalities. Weird. Number 10, Venom and Clint Barton. Things get pretty weirdly kinky with these two characters in the New Avengers Annual issue number 3 from 2009. Here we see what happens to Clint after he goes after Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers. He is being held as a prisoner and is being interrogated. I don't know if we'd call this so much a romance as a weird, sexy monster moment, but it's definitely notable enough to receive a mention. Here Venom is bonded with Matt Gargan, Hawkeye is naked, and Venom is seen licking him from behind and very loosely and suggestively choking him, while Norman asks him where the other true Avengers are hiding out. It's all very sensual in a way that is odd and to me definitely implies Venom or Mac or some combination basically consider Hawkeye to be a hottie. That's how it's made to look anyways. I can't blame them though, I feel like Clint Barton is definitely a hottie, so yeah. Number 9, Flash Thompson and Valkyrie. This was a relationship that happened during the Secret Avengers when Flash Thompson as Agent Venom was on the team. I know I said I'd be focusing on Eddie Brock and Venom relationships, but this one also technically involves Venom through Flash and is too weird for me to just not include. Also, Flash was Agent Venom for quite a while in the comics, so I feel like we can just definitely count him in. This relationship was more strange because it was just so out of the blue. I don't have anything against it, but even Valkyrie Brunhilde acknowledged the awkwardness and decided to take matters into her own hands by basically jumping Flash Thompson's bones. It was a strange, secret relationship, but I guess what do you expect on the Secret Avengers? Seems oddly fitting, if not a bit abrupt. Alright friends, before we move on to that next point, it's that part of the video where I do the YouTube thing and I say, hey, click this like cause it helps us. But seriously, click this like cause it helps us. Number 8. Venom and Mary Jane. Another strange romance for sure. Venom basically left MJ traumatized when the two first met, to the point that she was terrified of them and has had various disturbing experiences with them throughout her history. And yet, this is comics, and histories are long, so pretty much anyone can end up with anyone. Also, this is MJ, and I feel like everyone just wants to ship her with everyone because, I mean, MJ's a hottie, so yeah. These two haven't gotten romantic in the traditional sense, but there have been a few moments where Venom has seemingly pined for Mary Jane, resenting the fact that Eddie always seems to get the girl, despite the fact that he is usually the one messing up those relationships. Which is very strange, especially considering how much Venom seems to pine for Eddie, but anyways. Once again, Venom is definitely a jealous creature by nature, which we've seen time and time again in the comics. We have also seen the symbiote bond with Mary Jane, much to her own chagrin, and despite the likely conflicted feelings of MJ fans at this happening. But yeah, it's a weird and problematic thing, and it's there. So let's just acknowledge it. Number 7. Eddie Brock and Liz Allen. A romance that never really amounted to anything other than Eddie trying to make a move on Liz, who pretty much just always rejects him. This attempt at a romance was made even weirder too when Venom revealed their jealousy of Liz, although I get it, they want Eddie all to themselves. Why bother with Liz when Eddie has a perfectly good romantic partner in Venom? The whole thing is pretty weird though, Venom feeling the need to compete with Liz for Eddie's attention, when really, who has more of Eddie's time than Venom themselves? They basically like have a monopoly on it. They spend most of their time bonded to the guy, but the whole exchange here is made even more strange by the fact that Liz doesn't really reciprocate Eddie's romantic interest to begin with. So there isn't that much even for Venom to be jealous of, other than I guess Eddie's wandering eye. Venom's like, Eddie, I see your eyes wandering and just look at me. Just look at your symbiote. Look at yourself in the mirror, basically. Number 6. Venom and Spider-Man. One of the greatest unrequited love stories of all time. Poor Venom just wanted to bond with Spider-Man, but Spider-Man was having none of it. This was truly a rough time for the symbiote, who just was getting rejected left, right, and center until he fell into the lap of Eddie Brock, who seemed to also share his hatred for Spider-Man, and the two basically encouraged a sense of hate and kind of rage in one another initially because of this negative experience that Venom had originally with Peter Parker. If you don't believe me that this was a romance of sorts, just look at the name of the issue where the two kind of break up more permanently in Web of Spider-Man. The name of the story where the suit attempts to once more bond to Peter unsuccessfully, who shakes it off with the sonic disruptance of some loud bells ringing, is called Till Death Do Us Part. Sounds pretty romantic to me. Definitely some strange, sad, and unrequited love there. Poor Venom, they're always being rejected by Spider-Man, continuously. Number 5. Venom and Lee Price. Lee Price really messed up Venom. Their relationship was weird in the worst of ways. Venom bonded to Lee when it was desperate for a host, but Lee ended up taking control of the symbiote and using it to do all kinds of terrible things and kill people. Not that the symbiote hadn't killed people before, I mean it had, but the huge difference here was this was very much against Venom's will, and Price would often use it to target people regardless of their alignment, which Venom has always been conflicted about, while with Eddie it was against hurting innocents for the most part. But Lee didn't care about what Venom wanted or its feelings. Basically, this relationship between Price and Venom, while not inherently romantic explicitly, was meant to symbolize the most toxic kind of romantic relationship. An abusive one. Number 4. Venom and Beck Underwood. This one was pretty weird because Beck seemed to be super into it at first, Well, I mean for a time anyways. Like most people, she ended up ultimately being turned off by the whole combo deal of Venom and Eddie Brock together. In the end, the whole dating of both the symbiote and Eddie ended up just being too much for her. It got pretty strange too when Beck asked Eddie about his relationship with the suit and wanted to make sure it was healthy. One of the things that I actually didn't really like about her was how she got kind of a bit judgy when she felt the need to seek clarity on if Eddie was really enamored with Venom because he just hadn't found an adequate and committed woman to settle down with. Let Eddie love his alien suit, I say. Just let it happen. But I totally understand that it can be a lot for someone to get involved with both Eddie Brock and, you know, the alien that is Venom. That's a lot. In the end, the two ended up parting on amicable terms, with Beck giving both Eddie and Venom one last kiss and hug. And Venom was also super heartbroken about it. They were like, no, please don't leave us. Number 3. Eddie Brock and Ashley Kafka. This one comes to us not from the comics, but instead from the Spider-Man animated series out of the 90s. Here, Dr. Ashley Kafka was the person treating Eddie Brock during his time at Ravencroft Institute for the criminally insane. Eddie insisted that he was Venom, but Dr. Kafka believed that he was just delusional and that stress had basically caused him to lash out and to believe that he was the villain Venom, when he actually wasn't. This relationship was weird on the premise that it was a patient and doctor relationship turned romance, and the fact that both fell in love with one another while Ashley kinda thought Eddie was imagining being Venom and was at the time insane. So yeah. It got even weirder when Carnage got involved and caused a bunch of chaos that caused Eddie to save the day once reunited with the Venom symbiote. In the end, they were unable to be together as Venom got sucked into a magical portal in order to save Ashley. Don't you just hate it when a magical portal and multiple villains prevent you from being with the one you love? I know I do. Number 2. Eddie Brock and Anne Wang. And Venom? This relationship basically got super weird in a bad way for Anne when Venom got involved. Anne and Eddie were originally married, but after Eddie lost his dad and his job, Anne couldn't take sort of the dark path that he was headed down and left him. This of course only put Eddie in an even darker place, and then he found the Venom symbiote. Together, their combined hatred for Spider-Man turned them into a villain, but Eddie still longed for Anne and wanted to make things right. They kind of ended up back together for a bit, but this also made things worse for Anne, who was left traumatized and feeling violated after bonding with Venom herself. She didn't like the person that she and the symbiote were together, She-Venom, nor what it did to Eddie. And it was all this trauma that actually caused Anne to be unable to leave her apartment for months, and later resulted in her taking her own life after Eddie and Venom confronted her once more and were super clueless when it came to just how fragile Anne's emotional and mental state was at the time. Because Spider-Man was also present at the time and also freaking Anne out though, Eddie of course continued to blame him for his problems and for the death of his ex-wife. Number 1. Symbrock. This is really the love story for the ages, but is also one of the strangest ones out there. Eddie falling in love with a symbiotic alien suit who it turns out is its own living entity, and vice versa. This is confirmed in the comics as the two have expressed their love for one another and even at times bickered like a married couple. They also call each other things like love and dear, so yeah, that's pretty coupley in my opinion. Not only that, but Eddie has helped Venom deliver children, even though those children are technically kinda just Venom's who reproduces asexually. But still, Venom considered Eddie to basically be the father of their children, so yeah. And also, Eddie helped the symbiote to deliver, in essence, their symbiote child together, Sleeper, bonding with Venom while it was in essence giving birth. This labor was a hard one, and Eddie bonded with Venom to help it through and to help stabilize his partner, not just in this labor, but also in heroics, crime, and in a way, love. Aside from this moment, we have seen tons of other moments where the pair chose to be together and support one another in a pretty intimate way. At the end of the day, these two together are one of the weirdest and sweetest romances on this list.